under the frost-laced canopy of ancient pines, where the moon wept silver tears into the snow. A single howl pierced the endless white, echoing the fracture of a heart long denied its pack. Ilara's boots crunched through the brittle crust of snow as she stumbled deeper into the whispering forest, the weight of her banishment pressing like an iron collar against her throat. The air was a blade, sharp and unforgiving, slicing through the threadbare cloak that barely shielded her from the wind's relentless lament. She had been an Omega once, cherished in whispers, her gentle touch a balm to the pack's weary warriors after battles under blood moons. But that was before the Alpha's mate, a she-wolf of sharp ambition and sharper claws, had twisted truths into venom. Unfit, she had snarled in the great hall, her eyes gleaming like polished obsidian. A curse upon our bloodline, barren and weak. The pack's howls had risen in agreement, a chorus of rejection that drowned Ilara's pleas. Now, exiled to the wilds beyond the mountain passes, she was nothing. A ghost in the gathering dusk, her scent fading from the only home she had known. The forest unfolded around her like a labyrinth of shadows, pines towering as silent sentinels, their branches heavy with the season's first deep snow. Flurries danced in the fading light, catching on her lashes, melting into the salt of tears she refused to shed. The cold seeped into her bones, a numb companion that mirrored the ache in her chest. She clutched the small silver locket at her throat, its surface etched with the faint outline of a wolf pup's silhouette, a trinket forged in secret by the pack's elder healer, a quiet act of defiance before the exile. Inside, a single strand of fur from her mother's last litter, soft and golden, the only remnant of family she carried. It warmed against her skin, not from heat, but from the fragile spark of memory, the way the pup had nuzzled her palm, trusting, innocent. What strength was there in survival, she wondered, if it meant wandering alone, her Omega instincts screaming for connection in this barren exile? Night fell swiftly, the moon rising full and indifferent, casting a pallid glow that turned the snow to shimmering veils. Ilara's breath fogged the air in ragged bursts as she crested a ridge, her legs trembling from exhaustion. Below, nestled in a hollow where the trees parted like reluctant guardians, stood a forgotten hut. Timbers weathered gray, roof sagging under snowdrifts, smoke long since fled from its chimney. It was a relic of some long-gone trapper or hermit, abandoned to the wilds. She descended, each step a surrender, until her fingers, numb and raw, pushed against the door. It creaked open on rusted hinges, revealing a dim interior, a stone hearth cold as death, cobwebs veiling the corners, a single pallet of moldering straw. She collapsed there, curling into herself as the wind howled outside, rattling the shutters like accusatory spirits. The locket pressed against her collarbone, its edges biting into flesh, a reminder that even in rejection, something endured. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by dreams of the pack's firelit gatherings, the Alpha's distant gaze never quite meeting hers, the sting of the mate's final decree: leave or be torn asunder. Dawn broke gray and merciless, filtering through cracks in the walls, illuminating motes of dust that swirled like lost souls. Ilara rose, scavenging what she could. A rusted kettle, splintered wood for kindling. With trembling hands, she struck flint to tinder, coaxing a feeble flame to life in the hearth. The fire's warmth was a fragile victory, its crackle a whisper against the forest's vast silence. Days blurred into a rhythm of survival, hunting rabbits with snares woven from vines, melting snow for water, the locket her talisman against despair. The forest tested her, wolves' eyes glinted from the underbrush at night, their distant weavos a mocking echo of the pack she had lost. Yet in the quiet hours, as she mended her cloak by firelight, Ilara felt a stirring, an Omega's resilience, buried but unbroken. She was no queen, no warrior. Her power lay in endurance, in the quiet healing of wounds unseen. But doubt gnawed. Was this exile her end, or the forge of something unforeseen? One twilight, as the moon began its ascent, painting the snow in ethereal blues, a sound shattered the solitude. Not the wind, but a faint, desperate whimper from the tree line. Ilara froze, her hand instinctively reaching for the locket. Peering through the frost-etched window, she saw them. 3 small forms, huddled against the cold, their fur matted and eyes wide with fear. Pups, wolf pups, no older than moons, abandoned or lost, their tiny bodies shivering in the gathering dark. One, the boldest, lifted its head and let out a plaintive cry, a sound that twisted like a knife in her heart. She hesitated, the pack's rejection echoing in her mind. Unfit, cursed. But the Omega within her stirred, drawn to the vulnerable, the forsaken. Stepping into the snow, cloak billowing like a tattered banner, Ilara approached. The pups flinched, then stilled, sniffing the air. Her scent, soft, maternal, laced with the forest's earth, reached them. The smallest one, with fur like shadowed silver, nosed forward, pressing against her leg. In that touch, a spark ignited, not pity, but purpose. She gathered them into her arms, their warmth seeping into her chilled frame, and carried them back to the hut. As the fire roared anew, the pups curled at her feet, their breath sinking with hers under the moon's watchful gaze. The locket gleamed in the flames, the pup etching seeming to pulse with life. For the first time since exile, Ilara felt the stirrings of a bond, not of blood, but of choice. Little did she know, these lost ones were but the heralds of a greater redemption, drawing shadows from the wilds that would test her shattered soul. The moon hung low that night, a silver sentinel over the hut's fragile sanctuary, its light filtering through the cracks like threads of forgotten promises. Ilara watched the pups as they slept, their small chests rising and falling in unison beside the hearth's dying embers. The bold one, with fur the color of storm clouds, had claimed her lap, its tiny paws kneading against the worn fabric of her cloak, as if testing the boundaries of trust. She stroked its head gently, the locket at her throat catching the fire's glow, the etched pup within seeming to mirror the one before her, an echo of vulnerability that stirred something deep and unnamed in her soul. The forest outside whispered secrets through the wind, but for the first time in her exile, the silence within felt less like isolation and more like the hush before a revelation. As dawn painted the snow in pale rose, the pups stirred with whimpers that tugged at her Omega instincts, raw and insistent. She melted snow in the kettle, mixing it with scraps of dried meat scavenged from her traps, and fed them from her hand. Their eyes, wide and luminous, met hers without fear now, a silent pact forming in the warmth of the hut. The silver-furred one, the smallest, licked her fingers clean, its tongue a soft rasp that sent an unexpected shiver through her. Not of cold, but of connection, fragile as the first thaw. She named them in whispers, Thorn for the bold, Luna for the silver, and Ash for the quiet gray one who watched everything with solemn eyes. In their presence, the ache of rejection dulled, replaced by a tentative purpose. Yet doubt lingered like frost on the window panes. What right had she, the barren outcast, to nurture what the wilds had forsaken? The day unfolded in quiet labor. Ilara ventured out to reinforce the snares, the pups trailing her on unsteady legs, their yips echoing through the pines like laughter from another life. The forest seemed alive with omens. A raven circled overhead, its cry sharp as a blade, and the wind carried the distant rumble of thunder from the mountains. She gathered firewood, the axe biting into frozen logs with each swing, her muscles protesting the rhythm of survival. Thorn nipped at her heels, playful now, while Luna curled in the snow, her silver coat blending with the drifts. Ash remained vigilant, ears pricked toward the shadows. As the sun dipped low, Casting long azure shadows across the hollow, a new sound pierced the air, not the pup's playful growls, but a low, guttural snarl from the tree line, laced with pain. Alara froze, her hand flying to the locket, its cool metal grounding her racing heart. The pups bristled, hackles rising as they huddled against her legs. From the underbrush emerged a massive form, staggering through the snow like a specter from the old tales. He was no ordinary wolf. His coat, once perhaps midnight black, was streaked with mud and blood, matted from wounds that wept crimson trails into the white. But it was the shift in his eyes, golden, piercing, human in their torment, that betrayed him. An alpha, shifted in desperation, his form a blend of beast and man, broad shoulders heaving with labored breaths. Scars marred his flank, old and new, a fresh gash from claws or blade, and an ancient one, silvery and deliberate, like the mark of a ritual gone awry. He collapsed mere paces from the hut, his growl fading to a ragged whine, eyes locking onto Alara's with an intensity that rooted her in place. Fear coiled in her gut, instinctive and sharp. The alpha's presence was a storm, commanding submission, even in weakness. Yet beneath the feral gleam, she saw the fracture, guilt etched in the furrow of his brow, duty's weight in the slump of his massive frame. Who was he? A rogue from a rival pack, perhaps, or worse, a king in exile, hunted for sins unspoken. The pups whimpered, pressing closer to her, and in that moment, her body moved of its own accord, the omega within overriding the terror. She stepped forward, palms open, her voice a soft murmur against the wind. "Easy. You're safe here. No harm." He snarled again, but there was no true threat in it, only exhaustion, the beast warring with the man. His gaze flicked to the pups, then back to her, curiosity flickering like embers in the gold. The connection hit her then, unbidden and electric, a pull in her blood, ancient as the moon's tide, drawing her to his wounded essence. But she denied it, shoving it down like a forbidden flame. What place had she for an alpha's gaze when her own pack had cast her out as worthless? He was danger incarnate, a shadow that could shatter her fragile haven. Yet as she approached, cloak trailing in the snow, she felt the locket warm against her skin, the pup etching pulsing as if alive. Kneeling beside him, she tore a strip from her cloak to staunch the bleeding gash, her touch tentative, born of fear and an unwelcome curiosity that whispered of fates intertwined. The alpha tensed under her hands, his breath hot against her wrist, but he did not pull away. Up close, the scent of him enveloped her, pine and iron, blood and storm-swept earth, laced with the musk of royalty, long burdened. "Who hunts you?" she whispered, more to herself than him, as the pups nosed closer, unafraid. Thorn licked at the wound's edge, and the alpha's eyes softened, a low rumble vibrating through his chest. Not aggression, but something akin to gratitude. The wind howled louder, carrying echoes of pursuit, distant howls, the snap of branches under relentless paws. He was in flight, cursed by his own kind, and in offering shelter, Alara teetered on the edge of her exile's isolation. The bond stirred again, instinctive, denied, fear warring with the curiosity of what redemption might look like in a stranger's shadowed gaze. As twilight deepened, she helped him inside, his weight against her, a testament to shared frailty. The fire crackled anew, illuminating the hut's confines, and the alpha shifted partially, enough to reveal a man's face, chiseled, haunted, with eyes that held the weight of fallen kingdoms. He said nothing, but in the silence their breaths mingled, the locket's glow a silent witness to the encounter's fragile dawn. Outside, the moon rose higher, veiling the forest in silver, as if the Deusa herself watched the weaving of destinies from the Forsaken. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments of the night they find you. The fire's glow danced across the Alpha's features, etching shadows into the hollows of his cheeks, where lines of unspoken burdens carved deep like runes on ancient stone. Alara knelt beside him, her hands steady despite the tremor in her chest as she pressed the dampened cloth to his wound. The metallic tang of blood mingled with the hut's earthy scent, moss and pine resin from the walls, the faint milkiness of the pups nursing at her makeshift bowl. He watched her, those golden eyes unblinking, a predator's gaze softened by the haze of pain, holding not dominance, but a quiet plea that mirrored her own hidden fractures. "Who are you?" she murmured, her voice threading through the crackle of flames, barely above the wind's mournful sigh outside. He shifted slightly, the partial form of man and wolf blending in the firelight, broad chest heaving, fur receding along his arms to reveal scarred skin, pale as fresh snow. His lips parted, but only a low rumble escaped, words trapped in the beast's throat. Instead, he reached out, massive hand engulfing hers for a fleeting moment, the heat of his touch searing through her like a brand. She pulled back, heart pounding, the locket at her throat pulsing warm against her skin, as if the etched pup within sensed the storm brewing between them. The night deepened, the moon's silver gaze piercing the hut's single window like a watchful eye. Alara busied herself, tearing more strips from her cloak to bind his flank, the fabric whispering against his fur as the pup circled curiously. Thorn nosed at the Alpha's paw, unafraid, while Luna curled against Alara's side, her silver fur a soft anchor. Ash remained watchful, eyes fixed on the door, ears twitching at every creak of settling timber. The Alpha's breathing evened, exhaustion claiming him, and in that vulnerable sprawl, Alara saw not the king of legends, but a soul adrift, guilt in the set of his jaw, duty's chains in the faded tattoo of a crescent moon on his shoulder, marking him as one who had once ruled under her light. Dawn crept in on frost-kissed winds, carrying the sharp bite of impending snow. Alara rose early, slipping outside to check her snares, the pups tumbling after her in a flurry of paws and yips. The forest held its breath, pines standing sentinel in the pale light, their branches laden with crystalline veils. She returned with a hare, its warmth a promise against the cold, and set it to roast over the rekindled fire. The Alpha stirred as the scent filled the hut, his eyes opening to find her portioning meat for the pups. He pushed himself up, wincing, the shift completing to full man form, tall, imposing, with raven hair falling wild to his shoulders, streaked with the night's grime. "Kyle," he rasped, voice like gravel under boot, the first word a gift or a curse. "They call me Kale of the Frost Claws." Alara met his gaze, her Omega instincts warring with the wall of rejection she had built. "And they hunt you," she said, not a question, handing him a strip of meat. He took it, fingers brushing hers again, igniting that denied spark, a pull in her blood, ancient and insistent, whispering of bonds forged in exile. He nodded, chewing slowly, the firelight catching the silver scar across his throat, a deliberate mark from some old betrayal. My pack turned. A rival Alpha, Thorn's brother, poisoned the council with lies of my weakness. I fled to spare them war, but the hunters follow, scouts from the Iron Fang, relentless as winter. His eyes darkened, guilt flickering like dying embers. I am no king now, just a shadow bearing the weight of fallen oaths. The pups sensed the shift, clustering between them, Thorn's bold nuzzle against Kale's hand, drawing a faint smile to his lips, the first crack in his armored melancholy. Empathy bloomed in Alara then, unbidden, as she watched him stroke Luna's ear with a gentleness that belied his strength. He was broken, like her, cast out not for barrenness, but for choices that spared blood where others craved it. "We all carry wounds," she whispered, touching the locket, its pup silhouette gleaming. "Mine from a pack that deemed me worthless. Yours, from protecting one that turned on you." The words hung, a bridge across the chasm of their solitude, the fire's warmth weaving them closer. But refuge was fleeting. As midday shadows lengthened, a distant howl shattered the fragile peace, sharp, commanding, echoing through the trees like a blade's edge. Kyle tensed, rising to peer through the window, his body coiling like a spring. "They're here!" he growled, the wolf surging in his voice. Ilara's heart seized, the pups whining as she gathered them close. Outside, the snow began to fall in earnest, fat flakes veiling the world in white. But through it, shapes emerged. 3 Iron Fang scouts, their gray coats blending with the storm, eyes glinting with predatory intent. They circled the hollow, sniffing the air, drawn by Kale's blood trail. Panic clawed at her, but Ilara moved with the quiet resolve of survival, barring the door with a fallen beam, her hands steady despite the fear's icy grip. Kyle positioned himself at the threshold, partial shift rippling through him, claws extending as he bared fangs in silent warning. "Stay back," he murmured to her, voice laced with protective thunder. The scouts lunged, crashing against the door, wood splintering under their weight, howls rising in a cacophony that drowned the wind. Ilara clutched the locket, its warmth a talisman, and in that moment their eyes met, his fierce, hers resolute. No words needed, the bond ignited, empathy forging into something unbreakable, a shared defiance against the enemies that mirrored their pasts. The first scout breached, a snarl twisting its maw, but Kyle met it with a roar, claws raking fur and flesh, blood spraying hot across the threshold. Ilara shielded the pups, her voice a soothing murmur amid the chaos, even as terror gripped her. Another assailant flanked, lunging through the window's shards, but she seized a burning branch from the fire, thrusting it forward in a blaze of instinct. The creature yelped, retreating singed, the scent of scorched fur thick in the air. Kyle dispatched the intruder with a savage twist, his breath ragged, eyes finding hers in the fray, a nod of gratitude, the first thread of trust. The storm of battle ebbed as the last scout fled, tail between legs, their howls fading into the blizzard's roar. Panting, Kale slumped against the wall, wounds reopened, but alive. Ilara knelt beside him, binding the fresh gashes, her touch no longer tentative but sure, born of the fire they had kindled together. The pups nosed at the bloodied floor, licking wounds with innocent tongues, and in their shared exhaustion, the hut felt less like a prison and more like a hearth. Empathy transforming into a bond, fragile yet fierce under the moon's approving veil. Outside, the snow buried the traces of violence, but within, the weight of their wounds lightened, if only for a breath, as destinies entwined in the quiet aftermath. The snow fell heavier now, a relentless shroud that muffled the forest's wounds, burying the bloodied snow in layers of forgetful white. Inside the hut, the air hung thick with the acrid bite of scorched fur and the coppery warmth of fresh spilled life, the fire's embers pulsing like a weary heart. Ilara's hands trembled as she worked, rethreading the bindings around Kale's reopened gashes, her fingers slick with the remnants of battle. The pups huddled close, their small forms a living barrier between her and the alpha's imposing frame, their whines a soft counterpoint to the wind's savage dirge outside. Thorn licked at a droplet of blood on the floor, his tongue methodical, while Luna pressed her silver muzzle against Ilara's thigh, eyes gleaming with unspoken questions. Ash watched from the shadows, his gray coat blending with the dim corners, ever the sentinel in this fragile fortress. Kyle's breath came in shallow rasps, his golden eyes half-lidded but fixed on her, tracing the curve of her jaw as if committing it to memory amid the haze of pain. "You fought like one born to it," he murmured, voice rough as splintered ice, the words pulling her gaze to his. Up close, in the fire's intimate glow, she saw the fractures more clearly. The crescent tattoo on his shoulder, faded but etched with ritual precision, a mark of the frostclaw crown he had forsaken. Guilt shadowed his features, not the brash remorse of a fallen warrior, but the quiet erosion of a king who had chosen mercy over conquest, only to be branded traitor. An Omega, wielding fire as a blade, the Dusa smiles on the forsaken. Alara shook her head, the locket shifting against her collarbone, its etched pup silhouette catching the light like a captured star. Not born to it, forced by it. Exile strips you bare, leaves only instinct. Her voice wavered, the Omega pulled toward him, warring with the scars of rejection. That instinctive draw, now a tide she could no longer deny. She had rationalized it as survival's mercy, this sheltering of a wounded alpha. But in the battle's echo, it felt like destiny's cruel jest. The pup sensed her turmoil, nuzzling closer, their warmth seeping into her like a balm against the cold knot in her chest. What was strength, if not choosing to heal what others deemed broken? Yet doubt gnawed, the pack's old venom whispering, unfit, barren, a curse. As the storm raged, rattling the shutters like the ghosts of Iron Fang's scouts, Kale reached for her hand again, this time not fleeting but deliberate, his calloused palm enveloping hers. The contact ignited something deep, a spark that raced through her veins, hot and unbidden, sinking their pulses in a rhythm older than words. She pulled away, but not before the locket flared, its silver surface blooming with an inner light, soft as moonlight on fresh snow. Ilara gasped. Clutching it, the metal no longer cool but alive, thrumming against her skin like the beat of hidden wings. Visions flickered at the edges of her sight, not memories, but fragments of futures unwritten. Kyle's throne reclaimed under a blood moon, Pax united not by fang, but by forgiveness, and at the center, her own form, wreathed in silver light, guiding lost souls through shadowed veils. The Alpha's eyes widened, recognition dawning like the first crack of dawn on permafrost. He sat up sharper, ignoring the pull of his wounds, his gaze boring into the locket as if it held the secrets of his unraveling kingdom. The Pathfinder's mark, he breathed, voice laced with awe and the weight of prophecy. My seers spoke of her, an Omega scorned by her own, bearer of the Luna's sight, who would reveal the paths of the exiled. The locket. It's no trinket, it's the key. His hand hovered near it, not touching, reverence in the restraint, as the fire popped and spat, casting their shadows long and entwined across the walls. Ilara recoiled, the vision swirling clearer now, the Frostclaw halls, echoing with betrayal's howls. A rival Alpha's throne stained red. And Kale, crowned anew, but only if he embraced the mercy she embodied. Her gift, long dormant in the barren exile, manifested in this touch, this bond. A spiritual compass for the forsaken, drawing wolves to her like moths to lunar flame. The pups stirred, their eyes reflecting the locket's glow, as if they too felt the awakening. Thorn's playful nips turning protective. Luna's silver fur shimmering unnaturally, Ash's vigilance sharpening to prescience. Tears pricked her eyes, hot against the chill, the revelation a double-edged blade. She had been cast out as worthless, yet here she stood, the fulcrum of a king's redemption, a pathfinder destined to heal wounds of blood and spirit, to guide Pax through the moral tempests of war and guilt. But acceptance was no swift surrender. This changes nothing, she whispered, voice cracking like thin ice underfoot, even as the pull intensified, her Omega essence resonating with his Alpha core. I'm no savior. The pack deemed me empty, a vessel for nothing. How can I be your path when I wander my own in darkness? The wind howled in response, carrying distant weavos that spoke of gathering storms, more hunters perhaps, or the inexorable tide of Kale's past crashing upon them. He leaned closer, the scent of him, iron and pine, now laced with the faint ozone of revelation, enveloping her. Every king carries a wound that demands mercy's crown. You, Elara, were born to mend it, not as reward, but as proof. The Deusa chose you, locket and all, to light the way through betrayal's fog. The locket's light faded slowly, leaving the hut in firelit quiet. But the air hummed with possibility, the bond no longer denied but acknowledged, fragile as a thaw's first drip. Outside, the moon pierced the blizzard's veil, bathing the snow in ethereal silver, as if affirming the unveiling. Elara met his gaze, the weight of destiny settling like fresh powder on her shoulders. Fear mingling with a nascent fire, the Pathfinder's gift a beacon she could no longer extinguish. Yet in its glow, dilemmas stirred. To embrace this role meant risking her solitude's fragile peace, inviting the wars of kings into her haven. The pups curled at her feet, their breaths a chorus of trust, while Kale's hand rested near hers, the silence between them thick with unspoken choices. What was freedom, if not the liberty to forge redemption from rejection's ashes? The night deepened, the storm's fury a symphony to their quiet awakening, blood and fire witnesses to the revelation that bound them tighter than any chain. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw your worth. The blizzard's howl softened to a mournful dirge as dawn clawed its way through the pines, painting the snow in strokes of bruised lavender and steel. Elara stood at the hut's threshold, the locket heavy against her chest like a stone forged from starlight, its inner glow now a faint echo in her veins. The visions from the night lingered, spectral threads weaving through her thoughts. Kale's throne, slick with the promise of blood or balm, her hand guiding him through shadowed halls where forgiveness warred with vengeance. The pups stirred behind her, their soft whines a tether to the present, but the air thrummed with foreboding. The distant weavos no longer scattered echoes, but a gathering chorus, swelling like the tide of judgment itself. Kale moved beside her, his wounds bound but his stance unyielding, the partial shift lending him the silhouette of a shadowed monarch. "They come not just for me," he said, voice low and resonant, carrying the weight of crowns long shattered. "The Iron Fang's Alpha, my brother Draven, seeks to erase all traces of my mercy. He whispers to the packs that I am the curse, the one who weakened us by sparing lives in the last border war." His golden eyes met hers, shadowed by the guilt that had etched lines into his face, a king's melancholy born of choices that spared rivers of blood only to invite betrayal's flood. Elara felt the pull sharpen, her Omega essence resonating with his fractured duty. But she armored herself against it. Love was no easy surrender, not when freedom's solitude had become her only throne. The forest parted, like a veil torn by invisible claws, and they emerged. Not scouts, but the full vanguard of the Iron Fang, a dozen strong, their gray coats dusted with snow, eyes burning with the fervor of the righteous damned. At their fore rode Draven on a massive steed, its breath steaming like forge fire, his form a mirror twisted, taller than Kale, broader, with fur streaked iron red, the mark of an alpha who claimed power through fang and deceit. Flanking him were shadows of Alara's own past, emissaries from her exiled pack, the she-wolf who had branded her barren, her ambitious eyes now gleaming with opportunistic hunger. "Sister of the Forsaken," the she-wolf sneered, her voice slicing through the wind like a barbed whip. "You harbor the traitor who dooms us all. Surrender him, and perhaps the Deusa will forgive your emptiness." Alara's hand flew to the locket, its warmth surging as if the pup within snarled defiance. The pups pressed against her legs, thorns growl a tiny thunder, Luna's silver fur bristling like moonlight on blades, Ash's gaze piercing the intruders with uncanny foresight. Visions flickered anew. Draven's rise built on her old pack's alliance, a war that would swallow the northern wilds unless mercy's path prevailed. "He is no traitor," she called, her voice steady despite the tremor in her soul, the cold biting into her skin like accusatory teeth. "You cast me out for imagined curses, and now you hunt a king for choosing life over slaughter. What is power, if not the strength to forgive what claws at your throat?" Draven dismounted with predatory grace, his laugh a guttural rumble that shook the snow from branches overhead. "Forgiveness? That's the wound my brother bears, the softness that lost us the borders. And you, Omega Wanderer, what stake have you in King's games? Your pack knows your barren shame. Join us, reveal his hiding paths with that trinket of yours, and claim a place at my fire." His eyes raked over her, not with desire but calculation, the traitor's charm laced with venom. Kyle stepped forward, a low growl building in his chest, claws extending as the bond between them ignited, instinctive protection surging through Alara, her blood singing with the need to shield him, even as freedom whispered of flight into the endless white. The confrontation erupted like a storm unleashed. Ironfang wolves lunged, fangs bared in a frenzy of loyalty twisted by lies, their howls mingling with the wind's wail. Kyle met Draven head-on, their forms colliding in a blur of fur and fury, claws raking deep gashes that sprayed crimson arcs across the snow, blood as red as the rival's namesake, staining the purity of exile's blanket. Ilara backed toward the hut, the pups herding instinctively, but the she-wolf from her past circled, shifting to lunge with a snarl that echoed old rejections. "Unfit to the end!" she spat, jaws snapping inches from Ilara's throat. Instinct overrode fear. Ilara's hand clutched the locket, its light blazing forth like a lunar flare, illuminating paths unseen. Visions cascaded, not just futures, but truths unveiled. The she-wolf's ambition, the root of Ilara's banishment, a fabricated barrenness to secure her own mating claim. Draven's poison seeping into councils, turning brother against brother for a throne of iron and bone. "See?" Ilara whispered, the gift manifesting in a wave of silver mist that coiled around the attackers, forcing them to confront their shadows. The she-wolf faltered, eyes widening in horror at the revelation, her form trembling as guilt's weight crushed her resolve. One by one, the Ironfang hesitated, the mist whispering dilemmas, war's hollow glory versus the redemption of truth. Draven roared, breaking through to clash with Kael anew, their battle a visceral dance under the rising sun, fangs tearing, blood flowing hot and thick, the air thick with the metallic tang and the earthy musk of exertion. Ilara's heart tore between them, the bond pulling her toward Kael's side, his every strike a testament to the ethical king he remained, sparing blows where death beckoned. Yet freedom clawed at her, to reveal all, to shatter the lies and walk away, leaving kings to their wars, her haven intact with the pups who called her mother in spirit, if not blood. Love demanded more, forgiveness as a weapon sharper than claws to heal the fractures that birthed this storm. Kael staggered, Draven's talon raking his shoulder, reopening old scars, but he did not yield to rage. "Brother!" he gasped, blood flecking his lips. "End this. Mercy crowned us once. Let it again." Draven paused, the locket's light bathing them both, revealing his own guilt, the fear of weakness that drove his betrayal, the envy of Kael's unyielding compassion. The rival Alpha's eyes flickered, the war within him mirroring Ilara's own. Power or peace, vengeance or the fragile bridge of family. Ilara stepped forward, the pups at her heels, her voice cutting through the fray like moonlight on ice. "Choose," she said, not to Draven alone, but to all, the packs, the traitor, the king. War devours the soul, forgiveness forges it anew. I was rejected, deemed empty, yet here I stand, pathfinder to the lost. What wound do you carry that mercy cannot heal? The mist swirled thicker, the locket pulsing with the Deuce's breath, forcing truths into the open. alliances crumbling under the weight of exposed deceit, her old pack's emissaries turning from the she-wolf in shame. Draven recoiled, his form shuddering, the moral precipice yawning before him. Chaol extended a bloodied hand, not in strike but offer, the brother's gaze locking with his in a moment suspended, love's redemption hanging by the thread of choice. Ilara felt it in her bones, the ethical storm raging. To bind herself to this, to Chaol's world of crowns and conflicts, meant surrendering her solitary freedom for the uncertainty of union, of guiding souls through betrayal's thorns. Tears froze on her lashes, the cold wind carrying the scent of pine and possibility as the forest held its breath. The pups whined, nuzzling her, their trust a quiet anchor amid the turmoil. In that suspended breath, dilemmas etched deeper than any scar. Forgiveness a crown of thorns, or war's freedom a pyre for the spirit. The snow continued to fall, veiling the blood in white absolution, but the choice lingered, a spiritual forge testing the boundaries of heart and hierarchy, where every soul teetered on the edge of rebirth or ruin. The snow's relentless veil thickened as Draven's snarl fractured into a ragged silence, the locket's silver mist coiling around him like the Deuce's own judgment, stripping away the iron facade of his ambition. Ilara's breath caught in her throat, the cold air burning her lungs as she stood frozen between the clashing worlds, her solitary haven crumbling under the weight of revelations that demanded more than survival. The pups pressed against her, their small bodies a trembling shield, Thorn's growl a fierce echo of the storm within her. Chaol's extended hand hung in the air, blood dripping from his claws to stain the snow crimson. A poignant offering amid the metallic tang that hung heavy, mingling with pine and the faint, acrid smoke from the hut's distant chimney. Draven's eyes, once steel-hard with conquest's hunger, softened under the mist's unyielding gaze, reflecting the fractured mirror of his soul. The brother betrayed not by Chaol's mercy, but by his own fear of vulnerability, the throne's allure a poison that had curdled loyalty into lies. You see too much," he rasped, his massive form shuddering as the visions pierced deeper. Ilara's gift unveiling the web of deceit that bound their packs, her old she-wolf's fabricated barrenness a thread unraveling into collective shame. The Ironfang vanguard shifted uneasily, their howls dying to whimpers, the moral chasm yawning wide. To strike now meant embracing war's devouring maw, or to yield, allowing forgiveness to forge paths unbloodied. Ilara's heart thundered, the locket pulsing hot against her skin, its etched pup silhouette alive with the Deuce's whisper, a call to sacrifice the exile's fragile freedom for the union that redemption demanded. She had rationalized the bond with Chaol as mere instinct, a survival's fleeting warmth, but in this crucible of blood and ice, it crystallized. Love was no reward, but the proof of rebirth, the choice to heal what rejection had shattered. Freedom tempted, a siren song of endless white wilds with the pups as her only kin. But the pull toward Chaol was inexorable, his ethical melancholy a mirror to her own, guilt for choices that spared lives, now demanding they spare each other from isolation's slow death. Chaol's gaze found hers through the fray's haze, golden depths pleading not for kingship, but for the compassion that had drawn him to her hut like a lost soul to firelight. "Ilara," he murmured, voice threading through the wind's wail, raw with the vulnerability of a monarch unmasked. "The path you light, it's ours if you choose it, not as queen or savior, but as the heart that mends what crowns cannot." His words struck like embers on frost, igniting the omega fire within her, the denied connection blooming into acceptance, a rational surrender to destiny's tide, where power bowed to the quiet strength of mercy. Draven collapsed to his knees, the snow swallowing his form in a hush of white, his iron-red fur matted with the blood of kin-spilled wounds. "Mercy, it undoes me," he confessed, the admission a guttural sob that echoed through the pines, the mist dissolving as truths settled like fresh powder. The she-wolf from Ilara's past whimpered, her ambitious eyes dimming with remorse, turning away as the pack's frostclaw remnants emerging from the tree line, drawn by the locket's beacon, gathered in uneasy truce. No more fangs bared, instead a collective breath held, the forest's ancient sentinels witnessing the ethical pivot. War's chains shattered not by blade, but by the forgiveness Ilara embodied, her pathfinder gift a spiritual forge turning betrayal to alliance. She stepped forward, the pups trailing like shadows of hope, and placed her hand in Kale's, the union sealing with a warmth that chased the cold from her bones. Blood from his wounds smeared her palm, a visceral sacrament under the moon's rising arc, its silver light bathing them in ethereal absolution. The locket flared one final time, visions resolving into clarity. Pax united under a banner of compassion, her barren exile reborn as the mother of legions, not of blood, but of souls guided through winter's thorns. Kale drew her close, his breath mingling with hers, the scent of iron and pine enveloping her like a mended cloak. "You are my redemption," he whispered, lips brushing her temple, the melancholic king finding solace in her quiet strength. The storm broke then, clouds parting to reveal the full moon's compassionate gaze, its beams piercing the canopy to gild the snow in liquid silver. Howls rose, not of rage, but harmony, the pups joining in yips that spiraled upward, a chorus of renascimento. Ilara felt the rebirth in her core, rejection's scars fading like meltwater into earth, the love accepted not as escape, but as the ultimate choice, to heal the alpha's wound, and in turn, her own fractured spirit. Draven rose, bowing his head in submission, the rival no longer but a brother reclaimed, his pack integrating with murmurs of oaths renewed. The she-wolf approached Ilara, eyes downcast, offering a tentative nuzzle. Forgiveness extended, the moral cycle complete. Years would weave this moment into legend. The hut, once an exile's tomb, becoming the hearth of a new dynasty, where lost pups grew into wolves who called Ilara mother, their howls a testament to the Deuce's design. Kyle's throne awaited, not of iron conquest, but silver mercy, with her at its side, the pathfinder who turned despair to dynasty. In the quiet aftermath, as the first stars pricked the velvet sky, Ilara leaned into him. The wind's caress now a lover's sigh, blood and fire yielding to the moon's eternal promise. Strength was mercy chosen, love the forge of souls entwined, and in their union, rejection bloomed into eternal spring. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.